Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Read Aloud. We've got a great program this week featuring Eboni Francis and Deidra Herring, and I'm going to let them introduce their material. And I hope you enjoy the slideshow. There's coffee and tea in the back if you'd like anything, and otherwise just relax and enjoy the readings. Thanks for coming.
So Eboni and I will be kind of going back and forth. I'm going to be reading from a selection called Hair Story, Untangling the Roots of Black Hair in America, and it's by Ayana D, Byrd and Lori L, Tharps.
I'll be reading from Tenderheaded, a comb-bending collection of hair stories edited by Juliet Harris and Pamela Johnson.
So Black Hair in Bondage, 1400 through 1899. The story starts in Africa. The story of black people's hair begins where everything began, in Africa. Not surprisingly, the birthplace of both astronomy and alchemy also give rise to a people in perfect harmony with their environment. Indeed, the dense spiraling curls of African hair demonstrate evolutionary genius. Like natural air conditioning, this frizzy, kinky hair insulates the head from the brutal intensity of the sun's rays. Of course, there is not one single type of African hair, just as there is not one single type of African. The variety of hair textures from Western Africa alone ranges from the deep ebony, kinky curls of the Mandingos to the loosely curled, flowing locks of the Ashanti. The one constant African share when it comes to hair is the social and cultural significance intrinsic to each beautiful strand. In the 15th century, hair functioned as a carrier of messages in most West African societies. The citizens of these societies, including the Wolof, the Mendi, the Mandingo, and Yoruba, were the people who filled the slave ships that sailed to the New World. Within these cultures, hair was an integral part of a complex language system. Ever since African civilizations bloomed, hairstyles have been used to indicate a person's marital status, age, religion, ethnic identity, wealth, and rank within the community. In some cultures, a person's surname could be ascertained simply by examining the hair because each clan had its own unique hairstyle. The hairstyle also served as an indicator of a person's geographic origin.
This is a little folk tale called Why Colored Folks Have Nappy Hair. In the beginning, the story goes, nobody had hair. So God called everybody together to beautify them and hand out the hair. When the call came that the hair was ready, black folks were having a big barbecue that they wanted to finish. That's really funny to me. The other races came running, put the hair on, and smoothed it down. And so they have smooth hair. Then they issued a second call to the colored people, but the only hair that was left was the trampled hair on the ground, and so the colored people got stuck with the kinky hair. Next, I'm going to go into brief little definitions about good hair and bad hair. Good hair. Back in the day, and some still believe, a close approximation of Caucasian hair. The texture is generally wavy and silky soft to the touch. Of course, the length is long, or the hair has the potential to be long. Some folks used to call it nearer, my God, to thee hair. Bad hair. Tightly coiled, coarse hair that is thought to be hard to manage and is generally short. Also known as nappy hair, tight hair, and mailman hair, as in every knot's got its own root.
Because a person's spirit supposedly nestled in the hairdresser always held a special place in community life. The hairdresser was often considered the most trustworthy individual in society. The complicated and time-consuming task of hair grooming included washing, combing, oiling, braiding, and twisting or decorating the hair with any number of adornments, including cloth, beads, and shells. The process could last several hours, sometimes several days. Often the only tools the hairdresser used were a hand-carved wooden comb, specifically designed with long teeth and rounded tips to remove tangles and knots without causing excess pain. Palm oil and years of creative know-how. In some cultures, the hair was groomed by a family member because only a relative could be trusted with such an important task. In the Yoruba tradition, all women were taught how to braid, but any young girl who showed talent in the art of hairdressing was encouraged to become a master, assuming responsibility for the entire community's coiffures. Before a master died, she would pass on her box of hairdressing tools to a successor within the family during a sacred ceremony.
This is a poem called "The Kink That Winked" by Cynthia Colbert. A story of how a simple trip to the ladies' room to primp, powder, and perfume, giving it my all, almost turned into a brawl. There it sat, that one nappy, happy nap, like it's saying, "Look at me." I think it may have even winked, that kink beside the sink. Then suddenly, blonde squeals reel and peel, rolling over and over the stalls. "EU, look, a pubic hair!" Oh, no, they didn't. I blinked, teetering on the brink, and again I swear the kink winked. Now I'm changing the venue of this here menu, pondered the fine, saw the headline, pictures of me after the crime. A number rests on my chest, me facing west, local writer, quite a fighter. Move to the bowl, eyes, hips roll like jelly, ready to jam. Bam, move over, ma'am. Well, no time like the present, me so pleasant, and they like peasants, put in their places, stupid looks on their faces. As I began to comb my nappy, happy naps, one fell, two fell, then three, beside the sink, and I think they may have even winked.
So for nearly 400 years, an estimated 20 million men, women, and children were forcibly removed from their homes and dragged in chains to the slave markets on that infamous coast that stretched for 3,000 miles from Senegal to Angola. The captives were then sold to European and Arabian slave traders. Most of the slaves were then sold to European and Arabian slave traders. Most of the slaves were between the ages of 10 and 24, and the majority of them hailed from Western and West Central Africa. The citizens of countries such as Senegal, Gambia, Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Nigeria were highly sought after because of their specialized skills in agriculture, pottery, jewelry making, cotton weaving, and woodworking. One of the first things the slave traders did to their new cargo was shave their heads, if they had not already been shorn by their captors. The highest in dignity, wrote Ayuabo Suleiman Diallo, a member of a prominent West African family who was kidnapped and forced into slavery, was when his Mandingo assailant shaved his head and beard to make him appear as if he were a prisoner taken in war.
Tenderheaded, or Rejecting the Legacy of Being Able to Take It, by Meg Henson Scales. The question, "You tenderheaded?" reaches from blackberry depths to millennia of recalcitrant B2Bs. It is the nomenclature of dark feminine introductions that question before the hair-fixing rituals commence, before the immolation and the ambush, this naming of things. Are you tenderheaded?
The primary need for slaves in British North America was to work on the massive plantations in the mid-Atlantic and southern states. The slaves were expected to work in fields under a grueling sun for 12 to 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. The single meal of the day might consist of dry cornbread smeared with pork grease and some other type of overcooked vegetable. Punishments for insolence, slowing down, or rebellion included whipping with the cat o' nine tails, sadistic torture, and amputations of digits and limbs. Given these inhumane, unhealthy conditions, the Africans had neither the time nor the inclination to care much about their appearance, including their hair. So moreover, treasured African combs were nowhere to be found in the New World. So the once long, thick, and healthy tresses of both women and men became tangled and matted. Out of depression or desperation for a tool to replace the African combs, the slaves began using a sheep fleece carding tool to untangle their hair. Interestingly, there appears to be no record of slaves making new combs specifically designed for their kinky hair. We carded our hair because we never had no combs, but the cards, they worked better, recalled former slave Jane Morgan in an interview with a government worker from the Work Projects Administration. We used the cards to card wool with also, and we just wet our hair and then we carded. The cards had wooden handles and strong steel wire teeth, Morgan recalled. Scalp diseases like ringworm became pervasive among the slave population, as did lice infestations. When an outbreak of ringworm occurred, slaves commonly tied a rag around their heads to cover the unsightly scabs left by afflictions, and a worse infection would then ensue, creating a vicious cycle of hair problems, breakage, and patchy baldness. Whereas in Africa, women would spend hours a day grooming their hair and arranging in traditional styles, on the plantations they used scarves or kerchiefs fashioned from coarse fabric scraps provided by their stingy masters to keep their hair well hidden. Partly as protection from the scorching sun and hovering flies, and partly out of shame for the now unsightly hair, the head rag became ubiquitous in slave culture.